The Frozen Planet by Keith Laumer, a Retief story. Originally published in If Worlds of Science Fiction, September 1961. Narrated by Tom Trusser. 1. "It is rather unusual," Magnan said, "to assign an officer of your rank to courier duty, but this is an unusual mission." Retief sat relaxed and said nothing. Just before the silence grew awkward, Magnan went on. "There are 4 planets in the group," he said. 2 double planets, all rather close to an unimportant star listed as DRI G33987. They are called Jorgensen's worlds, and in themselves are of no importance whatever. However, they lie deep in the sector into which the Soetti have been penetrating. Now, Magnan leaned forward and lowered his voice, "we have learned that the Soetti plan a bold step forward. Since they've met no opposition so far in their infiltration of terrestrial space, they intend to seize Jorgensen's worlds by force." Magnan leaned back, waiting for Retief's reaction. Retief drew carefully on his cigar and looked at Magnan. Magnan frowned. "This is open aggression, Retief," he said, "in case I haven't made myself clear. Aggression on terrestrial occupied territory by an alien species. Obviously we can't allow it." Magnan drew a large folder from his desk. "A show of resistance at this point is necessary. Unfortunately, Jorgensen's worlds are technologically undeveloped areas. The farmers or traders. Their industry is limited to a minor role in their economy, enough to support the merchant fleet, no more. The war potential, by conventional standards, is nil." Magnan tapped the folder before him. "I have here," he said solemnly, "information which will change that picture completely." He leaned back and blinked at Retief. "All right, Mr. Counselor," Retief said. "I'll play along. What's in the folder?" Magnan spread his fingers, folded one down. "First," he said, "the Soetti war plan, in detail. We were fortunate enough to make contact with a defector from a party of renegade terrestrials who've been advising the Soetti." He folded another finger. "Next, a battle plan for the Jorgensen's people, worked out by the theory group." He wrestled a third finger down. "Lastly, an utter top-secret schematic for conversion of a standard anti-acceleration field into a potent weapon. A development our systems people have been holding in reserve for just such a situation." "Is that all?" Retief said. "You've still got 2 fingers sticking up." Magnan looked at the fingers and put them away. "This is no occasion for flippancy, Retief. In the wrong hands, this information could be catastrophic. You'll memorize it before you leave this building." "I'll carry it, sealed," Retief said. "That way nobody can sweat it out of me." Magnan started to shake his head. "Well," he said, "if it's trapped for destruction, I suppose—" "I've heard of these Jorgensen's worlds," Retief said. "I remember an agent, a big blond fellow, very quick on the uptake. A wizard with cards and dice. Never played for money, though." Magnan said. "Don't make the error of personalizing this situation, Retief. Overall policy calls for a defense of these backwater worlds. Otherwise, the Corps would allow history to follow its natural course, as always." "When does this attack happen?" "Less than 4 weeks." "That doesn't leave me much time." I have your itinerary here. Your accommodations are clear as far as Aldo Cerise. You'll have to rely on your ingenuity to get you the rest of the way." "That's a pretty rough trip, Mr. Councillor. Suppose I don't make it?" Magnan looked sour. "Someone at a policy-making level has chosen to put all our eggs in one basket, Retief. I hope their confidence in you is not misplaced." "This Antioch conversion, how long does it take?" "A skilled electronics crew can do the job in a matter of minutes. The Jorgensens can handle it very nicely. Every other man is a mechanic of some sort." Retief opened the envelope Magnan handed him and looked at the tickets inside. "Less than 4 hours to departure time," he said. "I'd better not start any long books." "You'd better waste no time getting over to indoctrination," Magnan said. Retief stood up. "If I hurry, maybe I can catch the cartoon." "The illusion escapes me," Magnan said coldly. "And one last word. The Soetti are patrolling the trade lanes into Jorgensen's worlds. Don't get yourself interned." "I'll tell you what," Retief said soberly. "In a pinch, I'll mention your name." "You'll be travelling with Class X credentials," Magnan snapped. "There must be nothing to connect you with the Corps." "They'll never guess," Retief said. "I'll pose as a gentleman." "You'd better be getting started," Magnan said, shuffling papers. "You're right," Retief said. "If I work at it, I might manage a snootful by take-off." He went to the door. "No objection to my checking out a needler, is there?" Magnan looked up. "I suppose not. What do you want with it?" "Just a feeling I've got." "Please yourself." "Some day," Retief said. "I may take you up on that." 2. Retief put down the heavy travel-battered suitcase and leaned on the counter, studying the schedules chalked on the board under the legend, "Aldo Cerise, Interplanetary." A thin clerk in a faded sequined blouse and a plastic snakeskin cummerbund groomed his fingernails, watching Retief from the corner of his eye. Retief glanced at him. The clerk nipped off a ragged corner with the rabbit-like front teeth and spat it on the floor. "Was there something?" he said. 2:28, due out today for the Jorgensen group." Retief said. "Is it on schedule?" The clerk sampled the inside of his right cheek, eyed Retief. "Filled up. Try again in a couple of weeks." "What time does it leave?" "I don't think—" "Let's stick to facts," Retief said. "Don't try to think. What time is it due out?" The clerk smiled pityingly. "It's my lunch hour," he said. "I'll be open in an hour." He held up a thumbnail, frowned at it. "If I have to come around this counter," Retief said, "I'll feed that thumb to you the hard way." The clerk looked up and opened his mouth. Then he caught Retief's eye, closed his mouth, and swallowed. "Like it says there," he said, jerking a thumb at the board. "Lifts in an hour. But you won't be on it," he added. Retief looked at him. "Some VIPs required accommodation," he said. He hooked a finger inside the sequined collar. "All tourist reservations were cancelled. You'll have to try to get space on the 4-planet line ship next." "Which gate?" Retief said. For the 2:28 for Jorgensen's worlds," Retief said. "Well," the clerk said. "Gate 19, he added quickly, "but—" Retief picked up his suitcase and walked away toward the glare sign, reading, 2 gates, 16 to 30. "Another smart Alec," the clerk said behind him. Retief followed the signs. threaded his way through crowds, found a covered ramp with the number 228 posted over it. A heavy-shouldered man with a scarred jawline and small eyes was slouching there in a rumpled grey uniform. He put out a hand as Retief started past him. "Let's see your boarding pass," he muttered. Retief pulled a paper from an inside pocket, handed it over. The guard blinked at it. "What's that?" "A gram confirming my space," Retief said. "Your boy on the counter says he's out to lunch." The guard crumpled the gram, dropped it on the floor, and lounged back against the handrail. "On your way, bub," he said. Retief put his suitcase carefully on the floor, took a step, and drove her right into the guard's midriff. He stepped aside as the man doubled and went to his knees. "You were wide open, ugly. I couldn't resist. Tell your boss I sneaked past while you were resting your eyes." He picked up his bag, stepped over the man, and went up the gangway into the ship. A cabin boy in stained whites came along the corridor. "Which way to cabin 57, son?" Retief asked. "Up there." The boy jerked his head and hurried on. Retief made his way along the narrow hall, found signs, followed them to cabin 57. The door was open. Inside, baggage was piled in the centre of the floor. It was expensive-looking baggage. Retief put his bag down. He turned at a sound behind him. A tall, florid man with an expensive coat belted over a massive paunch stood in the open door, looking at Retief. Retief looked back. The florid man clamped his jaws together, turned to speak over his shoulder. "Somebody in the cabin. Get him out." He rolled a cold eye at Retief as he backed out of the room. A short, thick-necked man appeared. "What are you doing in Mr. Tony's room?" he barked. "Never mind. Clear out of here, fellow. You're keeping Mr. Tony waiting." "Too bad," Retief said. "Finders keepers." "You nuts?" The thick-necked man stared at Retief. "I said it's Mr. Tony's room." "I don't know Mr. Tony. He'll have to bull his way into other quarters." "We'll see about you, mister." The man turned and went out. Retief sat on the bunk and lit a cigar. There was a sound of voices in the corridor. Two burly baggage smashers appeared, straining at an oversized trunk. They manoeuvred it through the door, lowered it, glanced at Retief, and went out. The thick-necked man returned. "All right, you, out," he growled. "Or have I got to have you thrown out?" Retief rose and clamped the cigar between his teeth. He gripped a handle of the brass-bound trunk in each hand, bent his knees, and heaved the trunk up to chest level, then raised it overhead. He turned to the door. "Catch," he said between clenched teeth. The trunk slammed against the far wall of the corridor and burst. Retief turned to the baggage on the floor, tossed it into the hall. The face of the thick-necked man appeared cautiously around the door jamb. "Mister, you must be—" "If you'll excuse me," Retief said, "I want to catch a nap." He flipped the door shut, pulled off his shoes, and stretched out on the bed. 5 minutes passed before the door rattled and burst open. Retief looked up. A gaunt, leathery-skinned man wearing white ducks, a blue turtleneck sweater, and a peaked cap tilted raffishly over one eye, stared at Retief. "Is this the Joker?" he grated. The thick-necked man edged past him, looked at Retief, and snorted. "That's him, sure." "I'm captain of this vessel," the first man said. "You've got 2 minutes to haul your freight out of here, buster." "When you can spare the time from your other duties," Retief said, "take a look at Section 3, Paragraph 1 of the Uniform Code. That spells out the law on confirmed space on vessels engaged in interplanetary commerce. A space lawyer, the captain turned. Throw him out, boys. Two big men edged into the cabin, looking at Retief. Go on, pitch him out, the captain snapped. Retief put a cigar in an ashtray and swung his feet off the bunk. Don't try it, he said softly. One of the two wiped his nose on a sleeve, spat on his right palm, and stepped forward, then hesitated. Hey, he said. This the guy tossed the trunk off the wall? That's him, the thick-necked man called. Spilled Mr. Tony's possessions right on the deck. Deal me out, the bouncer said. He can stay put as long as he wants to. I signed on to move cargo. Let's go, Mo. You better be getting back to the bridge, Captain, Retief said. We're due to lift in 20 minutes. The thick-necked man and the captain both shouted at once. The captain's voice prevailed. 20 minutes? Uniformed code? Gonna do? Close the door as you leave, Retief said. The thick-necked man paused at the door. We'll see you when you come out. 3. 4 waiters passed Retief's table without stopping. A fifth leaned against the wall nearby, a menu under his arm. At a table across the room, the captain, now wearing a dress uniform and with his thin red hair neatly parted, sat with a table of male passengers. He talked loudly and laughed frequently, casting occasional glances Retief's way. A panel opened in the wall behind Retief's chair. Bright blue eyes peered out from under a white chef's cap. "Giving you the cold shoulder, hey, mister?" "Looks like it, old-timer," Retief said. "Maybe I'd better go join the skipper. His party seems to be having all the fun." "Fella has to be mighty careless who he eats with to sit over there." "I see your point." "You sit right where you're at, mister. I'll rustle you up a plate." 5 minutes later, Retief cut into a 32-ounce Delmonico backed up with mushrooms and garlic butter. "I'm Chip," the chef said. "I don't like the captain. You can tell him I said so. Don't like his friends either. Don't like 'em them Sweaties. Look at a man like he was a worm." "You've got the right idea on frying a steak, Chip. And you've got the right idea on the Soetti, too," Retief said. He poured red wine into a glass. "Here's to you." "Darn right," Chip said. "Dunno whoever thought up broiling 'em. Steaks, that is. I've got a baked Alaska coming up in here for dessert. You like brandy in your coffee?" "Chip, you're a genius." "Like to see a feller eat," Chip said. "I got to go now. If you need anything, holler." Retief ate slowly. Time always dragged on shipboard. 4 days to Jørgensen's worlds. Then, if Magnan's information was correct, there would be 4 days to prepare for the Soetti attack. It was a temptation to scan the tapes built into the handle of his suitcase. It would be good to know what Jørgensen's worlds would be up against. Retief finished the steak, and the chef passed out the baked Alaska and coffee. Most of the other passengers had left the dining room. Mr. Tony and his retainers still sat at the captain's table. As Retief watched, 4 men arose from the table and sauntered across the room. The first in line, a stony-faced thug with a broken ear, took a cigar from his mouth as he reached the table. He dipped the lighted end in Retief's coffee, looked at it, and dropped it on the tablecloth. The others came up, Mr. Tony trailing. "You must want to get to Jorgensen's pretty bad," the thug said in a grating voice. "What's your game, hick?" Retief looked at the coffee cup, picked it up. "I don't think I want my coffee," he said. He looked at the thug. "You drink it." The thug squinted at Retief. Wise hick, he began. With a flick of the wrist, Retief tossed the coffee into the thug's face, then stood and slammed a straight right to the chin. The thug went down. Retief looked at Mr. Tony, still standing open-mouthed. "You can take your playmates away now, Tony," he said, "and don't bother to come around yourself. You're not funny enough." Mr. Tony found his voice. "Take him, Marbles," he growled. The thick-necked man slipped a hand inside his tunic and brought out a long-bladed knife. He licked his lips and moved in. Retief heard the panel open beside him. "Here you go, mister," Chip said. Retief darted a glance. A well-honed French knife lay on the sill. "Thanks, Chip," Retief said. "I won't need it for these punks." Thickneck lunged, and Retief hit him square in the face, knocking him under the table. The other man stepped back, fumbling a power pistol from his shoulder holster. "Aim that at me, and I'll kill you," Retief said. "Go on, burn him," Mr. Tony shouted. Behind him, the captain appeared, white-faced. "Put that away, you," he yelled. "What kind of—" "Shut up," Mr. Tony said. "Put it away, Honey. We'll fix this bum later." "Not on this vessel you won't," the captain said shakily. "I got my charter to consider." "Ram your charter," Honey said harshly. "You won't be needing it long." "Button your floppy mouth, damn you," Mr. Tony snapped. He looked at the man on the floor. "Get Marbles out of here. I ought to dump the slob." He turned and walked away. The captain signalled, and 2 waiters came up. Retief watched as they carted the casualty from the dining room. The panel opened. "I used to be about your size when I was your age," Chip said. "You handled them pansies right. I wouldn't give 'em the time of day." "How about a fresh cup of coffee, Chip?" Retief said. "Sure, mister. Anything else?" "I'll think of something," Retief said. "This is shaping up into one of those long days." "They don't like me bringing your meals to you in your cabin," Chip said. "But the Kappa knows I'm the best cook in the merchant service. They won't mess with me." "What has Mr. Tony got on the captain, Chip?" Retief asked. "They're in some kind of crooked business together. You want some more smoked turkey?" "Sure. What have they got against my going to Jorgensen's worlds?" "Dunno. Hasn't been no tourist got in there for 6 or 8 months. I'm sure I like a fella that can put it away. I was a big eater when I was your age." "I'll bet you can still handle it, old-timer. What are Jorgensen's worlds like?" "One of 'em's cold as hell, and 3 of 'em's colder. Most of the Jorgies live on Svea. That's the least froze up. Man don't enjoy eating his own cooking like he does somebody else's." "That's where I'm lucky, Chip. What kind of cargoes the captain got aboard for Jorgensen's?" "Darned if I know. In and out of there like a grasshopper, ever few weeks. Don't never pick up no cargo. No tourists any more, like I says. Don't know what we even run in there for." "Where are the passengers we have aboard headed?" "To Alabasta. That's 9 days' run in sector from Jorgensen's. You ain't got another one of them cigars, have you?" "Have one, Chip. I guess I was lucky to get space on this ship." "Plenty of space, mister. We got a dozen empty cabins." Chip puffed the cigar a light, then cleared away the dishes, poured out coffee and brandy. "Them Swetties is what I don't like," he said. Retief looked at him questioningly. "You never seen a Swetty? Ugly-looking devils. Skinny legs, like a lobster. Big chest, shaped like the top of a turnip. Rubbery-looking head. You can see the pulse beating when they get riled." "I've never had the pleasure," Retief said. "You'll probably have it pretty soon. Them devils board us nigh every trip out. Act like there was the customs patrol or something." There was a distant clang, and a faint tremor ran through the floor. "I ain't superstitious or nothing," Chip said, "but I'll be triple damned if that ain't them boarding us now." 10 minutes passed before bootsteps sounded outside the door, accompanied by a clicking patter. The doorknob rattled, then a heavy knock shook the door. "They got to look you over," Chip whispered. "Nosy damn sweaties." "Unlock it, Chip." The chef opened the door. "Come in, damn you," he said. A tall and grotesque creature minced into the room, tiny hoof-like feet tapping on the floor. A flaring metal helmet shaded the deep-set compound eyes, and a loose mantle flapped around the knobbed knees. Behind the alien, the captain hovered nervously. "Your puppies," the alien rasped. "Who's your friend, Captain?" Retief said. "Never mind, just do like he tells you." "Your puppies," the alien said again. "Okay," Retief said. "I've seen it. You can take it away now." "Don't horse around," the captain said. "This fellow can get mean." The alien brought 2 tiny arms out from the concealment of the mantle, clicked toothed pincers under Retief's nose. "Quick, soft one." "Captain, tell your friend to keep its distance. It looks brittle, and I'm tempted to test it." "Don't start anything with Skå. You can clip through steel with those snappers." "Last chance," Retief said. Skå stood poised, open pincers an inch from Retief's eyes. "Show him your papers, you damn fool," the captain said hoarsely. "I got no control over Skå." The alien clicked both pincers with a sharp report, and in the same instant Retief half-turned to the left, leaned away from the alien, and drove his right foot against the slender leg above the bulbous knee-joint. Skå screeched and floundered, greenish fluid spattering from the burst joint. "I told you he was brittle," Retief said. "Next time you invite pirates aboard, don't bother to call." "Jesus, what did you do? They'll kill us!" the captain gasped, staring at the figure flopping on the floor. "Cart poor old Skå back to his boat," Retief said. "Tell him to pass the word. No more illegal entry and search of terrestrial vessels in terrestrial space." "Hey," Chip said, "he's quit kicking." The captain bent over the Skå, gingerly rolled him over. He leaned close and sniffed. "He's dead." The captain stared at Retief. "We're all dead men," he said. "These Soetti got no mercy." "They won't need it. Tell them to sheer off. Their fun is over." "They got no more emotions than the blue crab." "You bluff easily, Captain. Show a few guns as you hand the body back. We know their secret now." "What secret? Don't be no dumber than you got to, Captain," Chip said. "Sweaties die easy. That's the secret." "Maybe you got a point," the captain said, looking at Retief. "All they got's a 3-man scout. It could work." He went out, came back with 2 crewmen. They hauled the dead alien gingerly into the hall. "Maybe I can run a bluff on the Soetti," the captain said, looking back from the door. "But I'll be back to see you later." "You don't scare us, Captain," Chip said. "Him and Mr. Tony and all his goons. You hit 'em where they live that time. They're pals of these Sweaties, running some kind of crooked racket." "You'd better take the captain's advice, Chip. There's no point in your getting involved in my problems." "They'd have killed you before now, mister, if they had any guts. That's where we got it over these monkeys. They got no guts." "They act scared, Chip. Scared men are killers." Don't scare me none." Chip picked up the tray. "I'll scout around a little and see what's going on. If the Sweddies figure to do anything about that Skåne fella, they'll have to move fast. They won't try nothing close to port." "Don't worry, Chip. I have reason to be pretty sure they won't do anything to attract a lot of attention in this sector just now." Chip looked at Retief. "You ain't no tourist, mister. I know that much. You didn't come out here for fun, did you?" "That," Retief said, "would be a hard one to answer." 4. Retief awoke at a tap on his door. "It's me, mister. Chip." "Come on in." The chef entered the room, locking the door. "You should have had that door locked." He stood by the door, listening, then turned to Retief. "You want to get to Jørgensen's pretty bad, don't you, mister?" "That's right, Chip." "Mr. Tony give the captain a real hard time about old Skåne. The Sweddies didn't say nothing, didn't even act surprised, just took the remains and pushed off. But Mr. Tony and that other crook they call Marbles, they was fit to be tied. Took the captain in his cabin and talked loud at him for half an hour. Then the captain come out and give some orders to the mate." Retief sat up and reached for a cigar. "Mr. Tony and Skåne were pals, eh?" "He hated Skåne's guts, but with him it was business, mister. You got a gun?" "A 2mm needler. Why?" "The orders captain give was to change course for Alabaster. We're bypassing Jorgensen's whirls. We'll feel the course change any minute." Retief lit the cigar, reached under the mattress and took out the short-barreled pistol. He dropped it in his pocket, looked at Chip. Maybe it was a good thought at that. Which way to the captain's cabin? "This is it," Chip said softly. "You want me to keep an eye on who comes down the passage?" Retief nodded, opened the door, and stepped into the cabin. The captain looked up from his desk, then jumped up. "What you think of doing, bursting in here?" "I hear you're planning a course change, Captain." "You've got damn big ears." "I think we'd better call in at Jorgensen's." "You do, eh?" The captain sat down. "I'm in command of this vessel," he said. "I'm changing course for Alabaster." "I wouldn't find it convenient to go to Alabaster," Retief said, "so just hold your course for Jorgensen's." "Not bloody likely." "Your use of the word bloody is interesting, Captain. Don't try to change course." The captain reached for the mic on his desk, pressed the key. "Power section, this is the captain," he said. Retief reached across the desk, gripped the captain's wrist. "Tell the mate to hold his present course," he said softly. "Let go my hand, Buster," the captain snarled. Eyes on Retief's, he eased a drawer open with his left hand, reached in. Retief kneed the drawer. The captain yelped and dropped the mic. "You busted it, you!" "And one to go," Retief said. "Tell him." "I'm an officer of the merchant service." "You're a cheapjack who sold his bridge to a pack of back-alley hoods." "You can't put it over, Hick." "Tell him." The captain groaned and picked up the mic. "Captain to power section," he said. "Hold your present course until you hear from me." He dropped the mic and looked up at Retief. "It's 18 hours yet before we pick up Jorgensen control. You're going to sit here and bend my arm the whole time?" Retief released the captain's wrist and turned to the door. "Chip, I'm locking the door. You circulate around. Let me know what's going on. Bring me a pot of coffee every so often. I'm sitting up with a sick friend." "Right, mister. Keep an eye on that Jasper. He's slippery." "What are you going to do?" the captain demanded. Retief settled himself in a chair. "Instead of strangling you, as you deserve," he said, "I'm going to stay here and help you hold your course for Jorgensen's worlds." The captain looked at Retief. He laughed, a short bark. "And I'll just stretch out and have a little nap, farmer. If you feel like dozing off some time during the next 18 hours, don't mind me." Retief took out the needler and put it on the desk before him. "If anything happens that I don't like," he said, "I'll wake you up with this." "Why don't you let me spell you, mister?" Chip said. 4 hours to go yet. You're going to have to be on your toes to handle the landing." "I'll be all right, Chip. You get some sleep." "Nope. Many's the time I stood 4 or 5 watches running, back when I was your age. I'll make another round." Retief stood up, stretched his legs, paced the floor, stared at the repeater instruments on the wall. Things had gone quietly so far, but the landing would be another matter. The captain's absence from the bridge during the highly complex manoeuvring would be difficult to explain. The desk speaker crackled. "Captain, officer of the watch here. Ain't it about time you was getting up here with the orbit figures?" Retief nudged the captain. He awoke with a start, sat up. "What's that?" He looked wild-eyed at Retief. "Watch officer wants orbit figures," Retief said, nodding toward the speaker. The captain rubbed his eyes, shook his head, picked up the mic. Retief released the safety on the needler with an audible click. "Watch officer, I'll, get some figures for you right away. I'm, busy right now." "What the hell are you talking about, busy?" the speaker blared. "You ain't got them figures ready. You'll have a hell of a hot time getting 'em up in the next 2 minutes. You forgot your approach pattern or something." "I guess I overlooked it," the captain said, looking sideways at Retief. "I've been busy." "One for your side," Retief said. He reached for the captain. "I'll make a deal," the captain squalled. "You're live for—" Retief took aim and slammed a hard right to the captain's jaw. He slumped to the floor. Retief glanced around the room, yanked wires loose from a motile lamp, trussed the man's hands and feet, stuffed his mouth with paper and taped it. Chip tapped at the door. Retief opened it, and the chef stepped inside, looking at the man on the floor. "The Jasper tried something, huh? Figured he would. What we going to do now?" The captain forgot to set up an approach chip. He outfoxed me. "If we overrun our approach pattern," Chip said, "we can't make orbit at Jorgensen's on automatic. And a manual approach—" "That's out. But there's another possibility." Chip blinked. "Only one thing it could mean, mister. But cutting out in a lifeboat in deep space is no picnic." "They're on the port side, aft, right?" Chip nodded. "Hot damn," he said. "Who's got the tater salad?" "We'd better tuck the skipper away out of sight." "In the locker." The 2 men carried the limp body to a deep storage chest, dumped it in, closed the lid. "He won't suffocate. Lid's a lousy fit." Retief opened the door, went into the corridor, Chip behind him. "Shouldn't ought to be nobody around now," the chef said. "Everybody's manning approach stations." At the D-deck companionway, Retief stopped suddenly. "Listen." Chip cocked his head. "I don't hear nothing," he whispered. "Sounds like a sentry posted on the lifeboat deck," Retief said softly. "Let's take him, mister." "I'll go down. Stand by, Chip." Retief started down the narrow steps, half stair, half ladder. Halfway, he paused to listen. There was a sound of slow footsteps, then silence. Retief palmed the needler, went down the last steps quickly, emerged in the dim light of a low-ceilinged room. The stern of a 5-man lifeboat bulked before him. "Freeze, you!" a cold voice snapped. Retief dropped, rolled behind the shelter of the lifeboat as the whine of a power pistol echoed off metal walls. A lunge, and he was under the boat, on his feet. He jumped, caught the quick axis handle, hauled it down. The outer port cycled open. Feet scrambled at the bow of the boat. Retief whirled and fired. The guard rounded into sight and fell headlong. Above, an alarm bell jangled. Retief stepped on a stanchion, hauled himself into the open port. A yell rang, then the clatter of feet on the stair. "Don't shoot, mister!" Chip shouted. "All clear, Chip," Retief called. "Hang on, I'm coming with ya!" Retief reached down, lifted the chef bodily through the port, slammed the lever home. The outer door whooshed, clanged shut. "Take number 2, tie in. I'll blast her off," Chip said. "Been through 100 abandoned ship drills." Retief watched as the chef flipped levers, pressed a fat red button. The deck trembled under the lifeboat. "Blew the bay doors," Chip said, smiling happily. "That'll cool them jaspers down." He punched a green button. "Look out, Jorgensen's!" With an ear-splitting blast, the stern rockets fired, a sustained agony of pressure. Abruptly there was silence, weightlessness. Contracting metal pinged loudly. Chip's breathing rasped in the stillness. "Pulled line G's there for 10 seconds, he gasped. "I gave her full emergency kick-off." "Any armament aboard our late host?" "A pop gun. Time they get their wind, we'll be clear. Now all we got to do is sit tight till we pick up an R&D from Svea Tower. Maybe 4 or 5 hours." "Chip, you're a wonder," Retief said. "This looks like a good time to catch that nap." "Me too," Chip said. "Mighty peaceful here, ain't it?" There was a moment's silence. "Done," Chip said softly. Retief opened one eye. "Sorry you came, Chip." "Left my best carving knife jammed up between Marbles' ribs," the chef said. "Comes of doing things in a hurry." 5. The blonde girl brushed her hair from her eyes and smiled at Retief. "I'm the only one on duty," she said. "I'm Anne-Marie." "It's important that I talk to someone in your government, miss," Retief said. The girl looked at Retief. "The men you want to see are Tove and Bo Bergman. They will be at the lodge by nightfall." "Then it looks like we go to the lodge," Retief said. "Lead on, Anne-Marie." "What about the boat?" Chip asked. "I'll send someone to see to it tomorrow," the girl said. "You're some guile," Chip said admiringly. "Darn near 6 feet, ain't ya? And built, too, what I mean." They stepped out of the door into a whipping wind. "Let's go across to the equipment shed and get parkas for you," Anne-Marie said. "It will be cold on the slopes." "Yeah," Chip said, shivering. "I've heard you folks don't believe in riding every time you want to go a few miles uphill in a blizzard." "It will make us hungry," Anne-Marie said. "Then Chip will cook a wonderful meal for us all." Chip blinked. "Been cooking too long," he muttered. "Didn't know it showed on me that way." Behind the sheds across the wind-scoured ramp, abrupt peaks rose, snow-blanketed. A faint trail led across white slopes, disappearing into low clouds. "The lodge is above the cloud layer," Anne-Marie said. "Up there the sky is always clear." It was 3 hours later, and the sun was burning the peaks red, when Anne-Marie stopped, pulled off her woolen cap, and waved at the vista below. "There you see it," she said. "Our valley." "It's a mighty purty sight," Chip gasped. "Anything this tough to get a look at ought to be." Anne-Marie pointed. "There," she said, "the little red house by itself. Do you see it, Retief? It is my father's homemaker." Retief looked across the valley. Gaily painted houses nestled together, a puddle of colour in the bowl of the valley. "I think you've led a good life there," he said. Anne-Marie smiled brilliantly. "And this day, too, is good." Retief smiled back. "Yes," he said, "this day is good." "It'll be a darn sight better when I got my feet up to that big fire you was talking about, Annie," Chip said. They climbed on, crossed a shoulder of broken rock, reached the final slope. Above, the lodge sprawled, a long, low structure of heavy logs outlined against the deep blue twilight sky. Smoke billowed from stone chimneys at either end, and yellow light gleamed from the narrow windows, reflected on the snow. Men and women stood in groups of 3 or 4, skis over their shoulders. Their voices and laughter rang in the icy air. Anne-Marie whistled shrilly. Someone waved. "Come," she said, "meet all my friends." A man separated himself from the group, walked down the slope to meet them. "Anne-Marie," he called, "welcome. It was a long day without you." He came up to them, hugged Anne-Marie, smiled at Retief. "Welcome," he said. "Come inside and be warm." They crossed the trampled snow to the lodge and pushed through a heavy door into a vast, low-beamed hall, crowded with people, talking, singing, some sitting at long plank tables, others ringed around an 8-foot fireplace at the far side of the room. Anne-Marie led the way to a bench near the fire. She made introductions and found a stool to prop Chip's feet near the blaze. Chip looked around. "I never seen so many purty girls before," he said delightedly. "Poor Chip," one girl said. "His feet are cold." She knelt to pull off his boots. "Let me rub them," she said. A brunette with blue eyes raked a chestnut from the fire, cracked it, and offered it to Retief. A tall man with arms like oak roots passed heavy beer tankards to the 2 guests. "Tell us about the places you've seen," someone called. Chip emerged from a long pull at the mug, heaving a sigh. "Well," he said, "I tell you, I've been in some places." Music started up, rising above the clamour. "Come, Retief," Anne-Marie said. "Dance with me." Retief looked at her. "My thought exactly," he said. Chip put down his mug and sighed. "Damned if I ever felt right at home so quick before," he said. "Just seems like these folks know all about me." He scratched behind his right ear. "Annie must have called 'em up and told 'em my names and all." He lowered his voice. "There's some kind of trouble in the air, though. Some of the remarks they passed sounds like they're looking to have some trouble with the Swedis. Don't seem to worry 'em none, though." "Chip," Retief said, "how much do these people know about the Soetti?" "Dunno," Chief said. "We used to touch down here reg'lar, but I always just sit in my galley and work on ship models or something. I hear the Swedis been nosing around here some, though." 2 girls came up to Chip. "Hey, I gotta go now, mister," he said. "These gals got an idea I ought to take a hand in the kitchen." "Smart girls," Retief said. He turned as Anne-Marie came up. "Bo Bergman and Tove are not back yet," she said. "They stayed to ski after moonrise." "That moon is something," Retief said, "almost like daylight." "They will come soon now. Shall we go out to see the moonlight on the snow?" Outside, long black shadows fell like ink on silver. The top on the cloud layer below glared white under the immense moon. "Our sister world, Göta," Anne-Marie said. "Nearly as big as Svea. I would like to visit it some day, although they say it's all stone and ice." "Anne-Marie," Retief said, "how many people live on Jorgensen's worlds?" "About 15 million, most of us here on Svea. There are mining camps and ice fisheries on Göta. No one lives on Vasa and Skåne, but there are always a few hunters there." "Have you ever fought a war?" Anne-Marie turned to look at Retief. "You are afraid for us, Retief," she said. "The Soetti will attack our worlds, and we will fight them. We have fought before. These planets were not friendly ones." "I thought the Soetti attack would be a surprise to you," Retief said. "Have you made any preparation for it?" "We have 10,000 merchant ships. When the enemy comes, we will meet them." Retief frowned. "Are there any guns on this planet? Any missiles?" Anne-Marie shook her head. "Bo Bergman and Tove have a plan of deployment." "Deployment? Hell! Against a modern assault force you need modern armament." "Look!" Anne-Marie touched Retief's arm. "They're coming now." 2 tall, grizzled men came up the slope, skis over their shoulders. Anne-Marie went forward to meet them, Retief at her side. The 2 came up, embraced the girl, shook hands with Retief, put down their skis. "Welcome to Svea," Tove said. "Let's find a warm corner where we can talk." Retief shook his head, smiling, as a tall girl with coppery hair offered a vast slab of venison. "I've caught up," he said, "for every hungry day I ever lived." Bo Bergman poured Retief's beer mug full. "Our captains are the best in space," he said. "Our population is concentrated in 100 small cities all across the planet. We know where the Soetti must strike us. We will ram their major vessels with unmanned ships. On the ground, we will hunt them down with small arms." An assembly line turning out penetration missiles would have been more to the point. "Yes," Bo Bergman said, "if we had known." "How long have you known the Soetti were planning to hit you?" Tove raised his eyebrows. "Since this afternoon," he said. "How did you find out about it? That information is supposed in some quarters to be a well-guarded secret." "Secret?" Tove said. Chip pulled at Retief's arm. "Mister," he said in Retief's ear, "come here a minute." Retief looked at Anne-Marie, across at Tove and Bo Bergman. He rubbed the side of his face with his hand. "Excuse me," he said. He followed Chip to one side of the room. "Listen," Chip said. "Maybe I'm going bats, but I'll swear there's something funny here. I'm back there mixing a sauce knowed only to me, and the devil and I be dog if them gals don't pass me every dang spice I need without me saying a word. Come to put my souffle in the oven. She's already set, right on the button at 350, and just now I'm sitting looking at one of them bending over a tub o' apples. Snazzy little brunette named her Layla. Darn it if she don't turn around and say—" Chip gulped. "Never mind. Point is," his voice nearly faltered, "it's almost like these folks was reading my mind." Retief patted Chip on the shoulder. "Don't worry about your sanity, old-timer," he said. "That's exactly what they're doing." 6. "We've never tried to make a secret of it," Tove said. "But we haven't advertised it either." "It really isn't much," Bo Bergman said. "Not a mutant ability, our scholars say. Rather, It's a skill we've stumbled on, a closer empathy. We are few, and far from the old homeworld. We've had to learn to break down the walls we had built around our minds." "Can you read the Soetti?" Retief asked. Tove shook his head. "They're very different from us. It's painful to touch their minds. We can only sense the sub-vocalized thoughts of a human mind." "We've seen very few of the Soetti," Bergman said. "Their ships have landed and taken on stores. They say little to us, but we've felt their contempt. They envy us our worlds. They come from a cold land." "And Marie says you have a plan of defense," Retief said. "A sort of suicide squadron idea, followed by guerrilla warfare." "It's the best we can devise, Retief. If there aren't too many of them, it might work." Retief shook his head. "It might delay matters, but not much." "Perhaps, but our remote-controlled equipment is excellent, and we have plenty of ships, albeit unarmed, and our people know how to live on the slopes, and how to shoot." "There are too many of them, Tove," Retief said. "They breed like flies, and, according to some sources, they mature in a matter of months. They've been feeling their way into this sector for years now, set up outposts on 1,000 or so minor planets, cold ones, the kind they like. They want your worlds because they need living space." "At least your warning makes it possible for us to muster some show of force, Retief," Bergman said. "That is better than death by ambush." "Retief must not be trapped here," Anne-Marie said. "His small boat is useless now. He must have a ship." "Of course," Tove said, "and—" "My mission here," Retief said. "Retief," a voice called, "a message for you. The operator has phone number Graham." Retief unfolded the slip of paper. It was short, in verbal code, and signed by Magnan. "You are recalled herewith," he read. "Assignment cancelled. Agreement concluded with Soetti relinquishing all claims so-called Jorgensen system. Utmost importance that under no circumstances classified intelligence regarding Soetti be divulged to locals. Advise you depart instanter. Soetti occupation imminent." Retief looked thoughtfully at the scrap of paper, then crumpled it and dropped it on the floor. He turned to Bergman, took a tiny reel of tape from his pocket. "This contains information," he said. "The Soetti attack plan, a defensive plan instructions for the conversion of a standard anti-acceleration unit into a potent weapon. If you have a screen handy, we'd better get started. We have about 72 hours. In the briefing room at Svea Tower, Tove snapped off the projector. "Our plan would have been worthless against that," he said. "We assumed they'd make their strike from a standard inline formation. This scheme of hitting all our settlements simultaneously, in a random order from all points, we'd have been helpless." "Is perfect for this defensive plan," Bergman said. "Assuming this anti-act trick works." "It works," Retief said. "I hope you've got plenty of heavy power lead available." "We export copper," Tove said. "We'll assign about 200 vessels to each settlement. Linked up, they should throw up quite a field." "It ought to be effective up to about 15 miles, I'd estimate," Tove said, "if it works as it's supposed to." A red light flashed on the communications panel. Tove went to it, flipped a key. "Tower, Tove here," he said. "I got a ship on the scope, Tove," a voice said. "There's nothing scheduled. ACI 228 bypassed at 1600. "Just one." "A lone ship, coming in on a bearing of 291/456/653. On manual, I'd say." How does this track key in with the idea of ACI 228 making a manual correction for a missed automatic approach? Retief asked. Tove talked to the tower, got a reply. That's it, he said. How long before he touches down? Tove glanced at a lighted chart. Perhaps 8 minutes. Any guns here? Tove shook his head. If that's old 228, she ain't got but the 150mm rifle, Chip said. She can't figure on jumping the whole planet. Hard to say what she figures on, Retief said. Mr. Tony will be in mood for drastic measures. I wonder what kind of deal the skunk's got with the Swetties, Chip said. Probably he gets to scavenge after the Swetties kill off the Jorgensens. He's upset about our leaving him without saying goodbye, Chip, Retief said, and you left the door hanging open too. Chip cackled. Old Mr. Tony don't look so good to the Swetties now, hey, mister? Retief turned to Woolbergman. Chip's right, he said. A Soetti died on the ship, and a tourist got through the cordon. Tony's out to redeem himself. He's on final now, the tower operator said. Still no contact. We'll know soon enough what he has in mind, Tove said. Let's take a look. Outside, the 4 men watched the point of fire grow, evolve into a ship ponderously settling to rest. The drive faded and cut. Silence fell. Inside the briefing room, the speaker called out. Bull Bergman went inside, talked to the tower, motioned to the others. Over to you, the speaker was saying. There was a crackling moment of silence, and another voice. Illegal entry. Send the 2 of them out. I'll see to it they're dealt with. Tove flipped a key. Switch me direct to the ship, he said. Right. You on ACI 228, Tove said. Who are you? What's that to you? You weren't cleared to berth here. Do you have an emergency aboard? Never mind that, you, the speaker rumbled. I tracked the bird in. I got the lifeboat on the screen now. They haven't gone far in 9 hours. Let's have 'em. You're wasting your time, Tove said. There was a momentary silence. You think so, huh? The speaker blared. I'll put it to you straight. I see 2 guys on their way out in 1 minute, or I open up. He's bluffing, Chip said. The popgun won't bear on us. Take a look out the window, Retief said. In the white glare of the moonlight, a loading cover swung open at the stern of the ship, dropped down and formed a sloping ramp. A squat and massive shape appeared in the opening, trundled down onto the snow-swept tarmac. Chip whistled. I told you the captain was slippery, he muttered. Where the devil did he get that at? What is it? Tove asked. A tank, Retief said. A museum piece by the look of it. I'll say, Chip said. That's a Bolo Retief, Model M. Built maybe 200 years ago in Concordiate times. Packs a wallop too, I'll tell ya. The tank wheeled, brought a gun muzzle to bear in the base of the tower. Send 'em out, the speaker growled, or I blast 'em out. 1 round in here, and I've had a wasted trip, Retief said. I'd better go out. Wait a minute, mister, Chip said. I got the glimmering of an idea. I'll stall them, Tove said. He keyed the mic. ACI 228, what's your authority for this demand? I know that machine, Chip said. My hobby, old-time fighting machines. Built a model of a Retief once, inch to the foot. A beauty. Now, let's see. 7. The icy wind blew snow crystals stingingly against Retief's face. "Keep your hands in your pockets, Chip," he said. "Numb hands won't hack the program." "Yeah." Chip looked across at the tank. "Here's to think that was a pretty thing, that Resatus," he said. "Looks mean now." "You're getting the target's eye view," Retief said. "Sorry you had to get mixed up in this, old-timer." "Mixed myself in. Darn good thing, too," Chip sighed. "I like these folks," he said. "Them boys didn't like letting us come out here, but I'll give 'em credit. They seen it had to be this way, and they didn't set to moaning about it." "They're tough people, Chip." "Funny how it sneaks up on ya, ain't it, mister? Few minutes ago we was eating high on the hog, and now we're right close to being dead men." "They want us alive, Chip." "It'll be a hairy deal, mister," Chip said. "But to hell with it. If it works, it works." "That's the spirit." "I hope I got them fields of fire right." "Don't worry. I'll bet a barrel of beer we'll make it." "We'll find out in about 10 seconds, Chip said. As they reached the tank, the two men broke stride and jumped. Retief leaped for the gun barrel, swung up astride it, ripped off the fur-lined leather cap he wore, and, leaning forward, jammed it into the bore of the cannon. The chef sprang for a perch above the four-scanner antenna. With an angry woof, anti-personnel charges slammed from apertures low on the sides of the vehicle. Retief swung around, pulled himself up on the hull. "Okay, mister," Chip called. "I'm going under." He slipped down the front of the tank, disappeared between the treads. Retief clambered up, took a position behind the turret, lay flat as it whirled angrily, sonar eyes searching for its tormentors. The vehicle shuddered, backed, stopped, moved forward, pivoted. Chip reappeared at the front of the tank. "It's stuck," he called. He stopped to breathe hard, clung as the machine lurched forward, spun to the right, stopped, rocking slightly. "Take over here," Retief said. He crawled forward, watched as the chef pulled himself up, slipped down past him, feeling for the footholds between the treads. He reached the ground, dropped on his back, hitched himself under the dark belly of the tank. He groped, found the handholds, probed with a foot for the tread-jack lever. The tank rumbled, backed quickly, turned left and right in a dizzying sine curve. Retief clung grimly, inches from the clashing treads. The machine ground to a halt. Retief found the lever, braced his back, pushed. The lever seemed to give minutely. He set himself again, put both feet against the frozen bar, and heaved. With a dry rasp, it slid back. Immediately, two heavy rods extended themselves, moved down to touch the pavement, grated. The left track creaked as the weight went off it. Suddenly the tank's drive raced, and Retief grabbed for a hold as the right tread clashed, heaved the 50-ton machine forward. The jacks screeched as they scored the tarmac, then bit in. The tank pivoted, chips of pavement flying. The jacks extended, lifted the clattering left track clear of the surface as the tank spun like a hamstrung buffalo. The tank stopped, sat silent, canted now on the extended jacks. Retief emerged from under the machine, jumped, pulled himself above the anti-personnel apertures as another charge rocked the tank. He clambered to the turret, crouched beside Chip. They waited, watching the entry hatch. 5 minutes passed. "I'll bet old Tony's giving the chauffeur hell," Chip said. The hatch cycled open. A head came cautiously into view, in time to see the needler in Retief's hand. "Come on out," Retief said. The head dropped. Chip snaked forward to ram a short section of steel rod under the hatch near the hinge. The hatch began to cycle shut, groaned, stopped. There was a sound of metal failing, and the hatch popped open. Retief half rose, aimed the needler. The walls of the tank rang as the metal splinters ricocheted inside. "That's one keg of beer I owe you, mister," Chips said. "Now let's get out of here before the ship lifts and fries us." "The biggest problem the Jorgensen's people will have is decontaminating the wreckage," Retief said. Magnan leaned forward. "Amazing," he said. "They just keep coming, did they? Had they no intership communication?" "They had their orders," Retief said, "and their attack plan. They followed it." "What a spectacle," Magnan said. "Over 1,000 ships, plunging out of control one by one as they entered the stress field." "Not much of a spectacle," Retief said. "You couldn't see them. Too far away. They all crashed back in the mountains." "Oh," Magnan's face fell. "Put it as well they did. The bacterial bombs. Too cold for bacteria. They won't spread." "Nor will the Soetti," Magnan said smugly, "thanks to the promptness with which I acted in dispatching you with the requisite data." He looked narrowly at Retief. "By the way, you're sure no, message reached you after your arrival?" "I got something," Retief said, looking Magnan in the eye. "It must have been a garbled transmission. It didn't make sense." Magnan coughed, shuffled papers. "This information you've reported," he said hurriedly. "This rather fantastic story that the Soetti originated in the cloud, that they're seeking a foothold in the main galaxy because they've literally eaten themselves out of subsistence. How did you get it? The one or two Soetti we attempted to question are—" Magnan coughed again. "There was an accident," he finished. "We got nothing from them." "The Jorgensens have a rather special method of interrogating prisoners," Retief said. "They took one from a wreck, still alive but unconscious. They managed to get the story from him. He died of it." "It's immaterial, actually," Magnan said. "Since the Soetti violated their treaty with us the day after it was signed, had no intentions of fair play. Far from evacuating the agreed areas, they had actually occupied 6 additional minor bodies in the weight system." Retief clucked sympathetically. "You don't know who to trust these days," he said. Magnan looked at him coldly. "Spare me your sarcasm, Mr. Retief," he said. He picked up a folder from his desk, opened it. "By the way, I have another little task for you, Retief. We haven't had a comprehensive wildlife census report from Brimstone lately." "Sorry," Retief said. "I'll be tied up. I'm taking a month off. Maybe more." "What's that?" Magnan's head came up. "You seem to forget." "I'm trying, Mr. Counselor," Retief said. "Goodbye now." He reached out and flipped the key. Magnan's face faded from the screen. Retief stood up. "Chip," he said, "we'll crack that keg when I get back." He turned to Anne-Marie. "How long," he said, "do you think it'll take you to teach me to ski by moonlight?" The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. You know, many of these stories were written in a time where 50 years ago was in the future.